I am excited. Our listeners know that I always say that I am excited. Why? Because we have great people on our episodes. And today we are going to learn in the study of psychology, it's called confirmation bias. And I just love the hard science behind the soft skills. And so when I was talking to our guest today in our pre-call, and she started using that very phrase, because so many times in my work, as I've talked about before, listeners, you're very familiar with that I don't feel that soft skills are soft, they're necessary. But boy, we
Yes.
are going to get from the source, medical doctor, specialty in psychiatry and in neurobiology. I would love to welcome to our show today Chika Oriuwa from Canada. Doctor, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
And our listeners don't have the advantage of being on the pre-call because I have a full two columns of questions today. And generally we just get talking and we don't get to all the questions. But first of all,
Mhm.
a bit, doctor, if you could, a background of what brings you to where you are in your professional career. I must also
Ah,
say that she is a published author. She lectures nationally and internationally. So we're really fortunate to have you with us today. So tell us a bit about yourself.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Carl. The gratitude is all mine. So I'm Dr. Chika Oriuwa. I am a resident in psychiatry at the University of Toronto. I am in my second year, going into my third year, but I'm actually currently on maternity leave. I have two little ones, a 3-year-old son and an almost 2-year-old daughter. And my journey to and through medicine has been quite unorthodox, I guess you can say. I'm one of those individuals that kind of always knew that they wanted to be a doctor. My parents said that I was about 3 years old when I professed to the world that I wanted to be a doctor. And this was long before I had any concept of the arduous path to medicine. I certainly did not have an in depth appreciation for the painfully long nights, the brutally early mornings, what it felt like to bring a life into this world in the labor and delivery ward or to hold their hand as they were ushering out of this life in the palliative care ward. But truly what I had an understanding of was that I was put on this earth to help and to heal, and I consider myself very fortunate such that the courses and the academic inclinations that I had very much aligned with a career in medicine. So I was fascinated by biology and chemistry, but I also really, really loved and gravitated towards the arts. So, writing and humanities, these were all things that I truly deeply loved. And I believed that the confluence of these things, my love for the sciences and my love for the arts, is what has made me, the proficient physician that I am, but also someone who is deeply connected to my understanding of humanity and how I've leveraged this understanding to be an advocate for marginalized communities, but also just an advocate for human connection, for equity, for inclusion within medical school, but also beyond medical school. So my story has been very, very textured, very nuanced, but very interesting, especially, being a Black woman navigating this world of medicine where we historically and traditionally have not been seen.
And I just got to ask, in today's world, it's fairly easy to publish a book. It is not easy to get HarperCollins, one of the biggest houses out there, to pick up your book and publish it. And that happened just 5 months ago for you in October of 24 when Unlike
Yeah.
the Rest hit the shelves. Tell us a bit
Yep.
about this publication journey. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Writing a book has always been on my bucket list for life. As I mentioned earlier, I've had a love for writing. I've been writing poetry since I was a little girl. I've been performing poetry since I was about 12 years old. And so writing for me is as organic as breathing. However, I always envisioned myself writing a fiction. I never thought in a million years that I'd be writing a nonfiction, let alone a memoir about my life. But this journey, I guess you can say, it really started when I was in medical school, and I was actually approached by my now literary agent, Rick Broadhead, but he was approached by HarperCollins, and I guess they kind of had a pre-existing relationship, the editor at HarperCollins, and they had said, can you get this person to write a story about her life? So the way that I have now come to understand how it came to be is that my first editor, Jim Gifford at HarperCollins, he had seen some of my work in the media. I guess he probably saw some of my public speaking online and a bit of my poetry and my writing online as well. And so he enlisted the help of my now agent, and they reached out and they said, "Have you ever thought of writing a memoir?" I said, "No." To be quite frank, no. I am, I've always wanted to write a book. I'm a writer at my core, but never thought I would write a book about myself. And so they kind of made that first proposal to me, but then of course you have to generate a book proposal in order to get a book deal. And so they told me like this is what's involved in writing a book proposal. It took me about 2 years because I was only a third year medical student. Like I was just so kind of windswept with all that comes with being in medical school. And it wasn't until 2021 that I was able to kind of, get my bearings about myself in residency to kind of sit down for a moment, draft the book proposal, work on it with my agent, submit it, and then within a matter of days, the book deal was extended. And I guess you could say the rest was history. So I ended up writing the memoir. It's entitled Unlike the Rest, a Doctor's Story. And it was published in October of 2024. And in a very, very quick nutshell, the book is a memoir. It's a story about the narrative is anchored in my experiences leading up to medical school and within my medical training, and namely my experience being the only Black individual in my class of 259 students at the University of Toronto, starting in 2016 and then graduating in 2020. And the advocacy work that I undertook in medical school in order to improve equity in medical admissions, and kind of the absolutely wild and beautiful and chaotic and incredible story that came from that with my career that has since extended outside of medicine and has given me this incredible platform and opportunity to reach into different sectors and arenas and now have this full and beautiful public speaking career as well.
So, to our listeners, any questions in your mind as to why I'm excited about the next few minutes here? As we talked about, Doctor, in our pre-call, the goal of our podcast is to
Mhm.
have people get off the exercise bike, out of their cars,
Mhm.
start their day with this doctor has just mentioned something I can use today, that I
Yep.
can start using a practical, we can go
Yep.
theoretical, but we got
Yep.
to help our listeners and myself included. This is
Yep.
something I can use. So I want to dig in right away to the biggest asterisk on my questions here.
Yep.
Talk to us about the hard science behind the soft skills comment that you mentioned, and talk to us about neurobiology. I'll pepper you with questions and interrupt you 1,000 times, but
Yep.
teach us, because so many times it's, oh, that's a soft skill, I need results.
Yeah,
Talk to
absolutely. Okay. Well, Carl, you're gonna get me going because I absolutely love this topic. So, although my memoir is very much anchored in my experiences of going through medical school, my keynotes and my public speaking is very much anchored in my lens, my neuroscience lens of how I interpret leadership and innovation. So I have a master's in health systems leadership and innovation, and of course I'm also a psychiatry resident. And so I'm really deeply fascinated about what it means to be connected to each other as humans and as leaders in our world, but also what it means to have a mind that cultivates ingenuity, a mind that is primed for innovation. And so I actually have a new keynote that I'm launching just in a couple of weeks, and it's entitled The Blueprint for Innovation. And in a nutshell, what it is that I'm trying to teach everyday people is how it is that we can leverage the power of neuroscience, so the hard science, in order to look at the circuitry in our mind, what we've already been given. How can we leverage and enhance these circuits that are priming our minds for innovation? So it's kind of a three-step fold. The first of which is that we ourselves can make ourselves more innovative, can prime our minds for innovation through tapping into neural networks that are associated with curiosity, which is the foundation of everything that has to do with innovation, as well as leveraging our ability to be creative, as well as our ability to critically think. So these three are the ingredients in our recipe for innovation. The second prong of this new framework is that how is it? Yeah, yes, please.
I want you to go and repeat what you just said about
Yes,
those four aspects, because that's
absolutely.
really foundational. So
Yes.
it again.
Absolutely. So in order for us as leaders, and I believe that everybody is has some kind of leadership potential or is acting as a leader in some capacity, whether that's at home, in their community, or in their place of work, everyone has the opportunity to develop their leadership skill. And leaders, part of being a leader is that we have to be innovative because we have to solve problems big and small. And in order to have an innovative mindset, we need to curate three specific things, leveraging the power of neuroscience, in order for our brains to be primed for innovation. So, the first of which is curiosity. This is going to be something that is innate. We are all born with this ability to be curious. It is evolutionary, it is existential, and our inclination or our proclivity towards curiosity enhances as we age. So we tend to think that children are the most curious amongst us. This isn't actually true. Yes, they ask a million questions, but we actually get more curious as we get older. It's just that we feel more inhibited in certain ways. That we feel like we should be more wise, we should know more, and therefore we stop asking as many questions, right? And then the second pillar to that would be creativity. Someone who is highly, highly, highly creative is more likely to be innovative, whether that's, again, in the community, at home, or in the workplace. And so we can talk about what we can do on a practical everyday level to be more creative. And as someone who is a poet, a performance poet, a public speaker, an author, creativity is at the heart of every single thing that I do. And then the last prong of that is critical thinking. And I think, as physicians, we can appreciate what it takes to, critically think. Medical school is not just about, filling us with an exorbitant amount of medical information. They're teaching us how to think like a doctor. It's a very specific way of thinking. And oftentimes it's about honing our ability to critically think, right? But that's just a component of innovation. It's just a component. And each of these things, they can exist in isolation. And we tend to bucket ourselves into different silos. Like I'm a creative, I'm an artist, or I'm a math geek, I'm a nerd, I'm a science person, when in reality, we all kind of have the ability to tap into these different facets, weave them together to really unlock our potential for innovation. So that's, kind of the first piece of that. I'm happy to explore that, Nora. I'm happy to jump into how we can unlock this potential in other people. I'm ready to go.
Put down as much as a base as you need. I've got a ton of questions just on what you said, how you can
Yeah.
unlock, and just to get it into your radar here, and you can weave it in. I
Hmm.
know that there's people driving to work right now that
Yeah.
are thinking,
Yep.
I am a young leader.
Hmm.
I'm leading some people on my team that are 10, 20 years ahead of me. They are there because they want the longevity of their position.
Hmm.
They do not want to hear anything I have to say about changing anything
Hmm.
because it breaks them out of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
Carl, my unit is as stagnant as they come. We do good quality care. We
Hmm.
take care of our patients,
Hmm.
but to get my team to do anything new, doctor, I would love to know about curious, creative, and critical thinking, but these
Hmm.
people aren't having anything to do with it. So
Yeah.
know that that narrative is begged for an answer on
Yeah.
how to do that. So
Yeah.
back to you and putting down your base.
Absolutely. And a part of a huge reason as to why I loved what you just said is because human beings by nature, we can be very stagnant, right? There is a comfort in familiarity, there's a safety in familiarity. So we don't want to deviate from what we know works, or at least what we think works, because there is a lot of risk involved in trying out something new, right? And so this framework really helps individuals, especially leaders, helps us build up our capacity to learn how to take micro risks, right? And also, this framework will enable you to be able to engage in conversations that are inherently disarming, right? This is me leveraging part of my psychiatric training, because when I engage with patients that can be, have their guards way up, understandably, part of my training is how is it that I can forge this connection through disarming this individual and allowing them to feel safe enough in my company, build that rapport such that we can have open dialogue and hopefully achieve an outcome that is, beneficial to them. And I think very much that the same skill set can be translated outside of the psychiatric emerge and into a lot of these spaces and places where we're trying to connect with someone who either does not want to be connected to or doesn't want to hear what we have to say or might be very have that cognitive rigidity. That can be a very difficult thing to penetrate. So and that this actually kind of blends and leads into the second prong of how is it that we as leaders, now that we've cultivated this innovative mind within ourselves, that's great, step one, but we can appreciate that great ideas and great innovation can live and die inside of the mind of someone who doesn't know how to lead, who doesn't know how to effectively galvanize other individuals to, unite around a common goal and achieve something. So great leaders, we can appreciate that great leaders are those who are able to lead with two key things. That's authenticity and compassion. And you can break these things down into kind of their constituent parts, but in essence, an authentic leader is someone who has a true in-depth understanding of who they are, what their value systems are, and they're able to align their actions with their values. And they're also able to lead with vulnerability, right? And that's going to be the key thing that when you're thinking about how is it that I can disarm someone, it's really leading with your humanity first. And that's leading with this understanding that I am a human having a human experience. I am curious about your perspective on this situation. I admit that I don't know everything, which can be hard for doctors to say, but that's step one is recognizing that we are fallible. We're fallible individuals because we're human at the end of the day. So can we lead with this connective tissue of vulnerability? And then the second component of that is compassion. Compassion is truly just empathy in action, right? So when we're thinking about leaders of, this person is so entrenched in their ways of doing things and they are so further along in their career, they don't want to hear what I have to say, right? If you're leading with empathy, you are leading with this understanding that this person's perspective might be different. And can you hold space for that? Can you try and mentalize? And again, this is from a psychiatric perspective. Can you mentalize why it might be challenging for that person to make a shift in their behavior or a shift in the operations of the unit? Because truly trying to empathize with them and truly trying to mentalize their perspective, that'll again give you the groundwork so that you can meet them exactly where they are. And then from that standpoint, you can lead with curiosity, right? Because curiosity, again, is the foundation of every relationship, but it's also the foundation of innovation. If you are being an intentionally curious leader, that in and of itself is disarming. If you ask someone, what is your take on this? Or what is going on with you right now? Or, how are you feeling in this moment? That is going to be something that is disarming, as opposed to coming to them and saying, it's really frustrating that you're not willing to change, you're not willing to do this. That can be very arming. That can be really, create a very hostile environment. And then finally, the very last pillar of all of this is unlocking collective genius. Because as soon as we recognize that, maybe that person that you're trying to reach out to, they're very hard to get connected with intimately or vulnerably or whatever it is. As soon as you recognize that that person within them is a wealth of genius and you have your own genius, how is it that we can synchronize our geniuses to unlock the full capacity for collective brilliance? Because the biggest problems that we face in this world are not problems that can be tackled individually. It requires collective genius. And so we need to be able to harmonize our innovative mindsets in order for us to fully be able to evolve and move forward. So that's in a nutshell this blueprint that I've mapped out. And we can go into the neuroscience behind authenticity and compassion and all the different things. So I'm happy to dive in at any point in time.
I Yeah, I could go a thousand directions right now. I want to get back to your comment about authenticity and compassion, because
Yeah,
those are eye rollers for many of my clients of, oh, please, you study that on your own time. That doesn't,
yeah.
we need to get things done.
Hmm.
But you mentioned in our pre-call something that fascinated me, and I wanted to
Hmm.
connect it to authenticity and knowing yourself, you
Yeah.
talked about the archaeologic dig to
Yes.
expose our own biases. And here in our little town, they found in this bog and swamp, doctor, this these bones of ancient bison. I mean, right
Oh
off
my
the side of
gosh.
the road is this archaeologic dig, and it's been kind of a big thing that, thousands and tens of thousands of years old. So when
Yeah.
you said archaeologic dig, I thought, I instantly went to that little picture in my mind. Tell us about this digging, because biases
Yeah.
are a big word now. Dig in for
Yeah.
us there.
Absolutely. So one thing you'll realize is that when I was developing this framework, I'm pulling from every facet of my life. And when I was talking about the archaeologic dig, I was talking about the facet from my poetry, from my life as a poet. Because in order for someone to be a poet, you truly have to be able to have this unflinching examination of the world. Okay. But in order to examine the world, we must first examine ourselves and our position in the world. And in order for us to truly understand ourselves, we have to do this archaeological dig, right? And what I mean by that is being able to introspect, to sit in the landscape, almost like the muck and mire of our entire like psyche and existence, to appreciate how is it that we came to this point in time today. So as a poet, we write a lot about our feelings, which is why we hear this phrase, the sad poet, the tragic poet. And for a lot of us, it's because we've had to explore our traumas, right? And I say that you can do this archaeologic dig in a number of different ways. If you have the privilege and the capacity and the access and the finances to have guided introspection with a therapist, that can be an exceptionally profound way that someone would be able to do this archaeologic dig. Because what you're trying to unearth are the biases that you might have, the unresolved traumas that you might not even know that you're carrying, right? Many of us can go decades into our lives, not even recognize that the way that we are interacting with someone else might have to do with a trauma that we've been carrying that's 20, 30, 40 years old. But we just think, oh, well, this is just who I am. This is just how I am. Not even recognizing that we have the capacity to heal some of the things that might have been traumatic for us so that we can change how we engage as leaders and just as humans in every relationship. So I think that if one has the capacity to go and get therapy and have different kinds of therapy, I think that that can be a deeply profound way of having an archaeological dig. That being said, it's not always the most accessible means for a lot of individuals. And I want to flag that because certainly that is the case in in the Canadian landscape. Finding a therapist, finding a culturally appropriate therapist, finding a financially accessible therapist is very, very hard. So if one doesn't have access to that, I think as another means of being able to achieve something similar would be through journaling. Now, again, this is another one of those like quote unquote, and your audience probably can't see my huge air quotations, the soft skills when there is a hard science behind journaling. Like we can appreciate that being able to truly journal through your experiences, once you start to put words on paper and actually begin to process the things that have happened to you or are currently happening to you, this can actually unearth a wealth of information. Of course, getting started can be a really tricky thing to do with journaling because it means that you have to sit with yourself, you have to sit with your thoughts, you have to sit with your biases, and that can be something that can be really frightening for a lot of people. It's really hard to go through and think about the things that have been, upsetting to you, especially if it happened in your childhood or if it was a really traumatic instance that happened to you in the past. It can be really, really hard. So I still think that the benefit, once someone has gone through this archaeologic dig and they're able to understand all of the things that have formulated their psyche, that have formulated their place in the world, then and only then can they now be in the position to lead because they will understand the lens through which their world is colored. They'll understand maybe what some of their maybe what some of their subconscious triggers are. They might appreciate where some of their vulnerabilities might be because they recognize that, oh, that's something that I'm sensitive to because of something that might have happened to me, right? So then and only then, once you've done that work, do I think you are in the position where you can truly be able to lead from a point of authenticity, but also with compassion, because you cannot extend grace to someone else if you don't have the capacity to extend grace to yourself first.
You need to say that last statement again because that is huge. And for those that are thinking, oh, a little warm and fuzzy, McKinsey just came out with a great book on leadership that talks about leadership from the inside out. The
Mhm.
research behind this, listeners, and to myself, which sometimes, well, yeah, maybe that's a little fluffy, a little woo woo, say what you just said that you cannot lead someone else.
No, you cannot lead without first extending compassion and grace to yourself. We often realize that when we are hardest on other people, when we give them no space to even fail or to err or to make a mistake, it's because we oftentimes don't extend that same grace to ourselves. And the research does show that when we are more compassionate towards ourselves, when we allow ourselves to fail with grace, when we allow ourselves to be fallible, to make mistakes, we are going to extend that grace to those that we lead. And that is going to be step one of being an effective and efficient leader.
One thing that jumped off the page at me in our pre-call, and I think this will tie into where you were going before I interrupted you for the 50th time. Um, you talked to me about vulnerability and how
Mhm.
it is tied to science, and you talked about mirror neurons. I'm
Yes.
thinking that this parallels with what you just said.
Yep.
Can't extend grace or compassion or understanding or whatever deep emotionally intelligent skill out there unless it's
Mhm.
practiced internally, won't go external. So talk to us about
Exactly.
the science.
Absolutely. So again, the hard science behind the soft skills, I just think it's so fascinating. So when we're talking about specifically the two key traits of a leader that I think will be important in order to effectively lead, which are authenticity and compassion, what is really fascinating about it is that when we practice authenticity intentionally, i.e., when we are being vulnerable with ourselves, but we're also modeling that vulnerability in those we lead. So as physicians, if we're practicing intellectual humility, if we say openly, I don't know exactly how this might map out, I'm not sure the exact answer to this, I don't know how to manage this particular thing, maybe I can rely on someone who knows better. When you model that vulnerability, what you are actually doing when you're being authentic to who you are going to be activating the mirror neurons in the minds of those individuals who are witnessing that vulnerability, that authenticity. So if you're a leader and you're being authentic, you're going to activate those mirror neurons. And subconsciously, what that is going to do in the person who's receiving your authenticity is that it's going to now prime them to become more subconsciously authentic themselves. So you're creating almost this contagion of authenticity. It's like this monkey see, monkey do effect. So I'm going to be authentic just by my actions. You're going to see me being authentic. And then you're going to subconsciously begin to act more authentic yourself. And the same is true of compassion. If someone on my team sees me being compassionate towards someone else on my team, even just witnessing that interaction is going to trigger that mirror neuron, which is going to lead them to see, okay, well, this person is acting in a compassionate way. Subconsciously, they're going to start acting more compassionately as well. So you can really shift the culture by creating this contagion of compassion and authenticity. And again, that's the hard science behind the soft skills. And there's more science behind that as well. If we're talking about looking at how it is that you can alter someone's hormones in their body as well, right? Oxytocin, that is going to be the hormone that is implicated in social bonding and trust formation. When I am being authentic and compassionate, what it's going to do is that it's going to lower the stress in the person that you are, communicating with. So their cortisol is going to go down. It's going to calm the amygdala. That's going to be the fear center in their mind. You're going to calm the chaos of the amygdala. And then you're going to increase this oxytocin. This is going to be the same hormone that, is triggered in our body when you're cuddling a newborn, when you're, cuddling a puppy, when you're in the presence of someone that you love. So this hormone, again, is not just for, an intimate familiar relationship. It's there in trust formation. So that is going to be a key part of building the connective tissue in your workplace. Is how can we foster real, meaningful, long-lasting trust? And that's through how it is that you modify your behaviors as a leader. And just a very last quick tidbit about the science behind authenticity and compassion. What is really, really cool is that when you're authentic, when you're compassionate as a leader, you are going to directly be activating the prefrontal cortex in your mind. And this is going to be the area of your mind that is most strongly connected to your executive function, your decision making, your strategy. So it has been shown that authentic and compassionate leaders it's not just, soft and fuzzy leaders, but you're going to make better decisions. And you can make better decisions under pressure when you lead with authenticity and compassion. And when you're also doing this from a neuroscience perspective, when you've, calmed the amygdala, when you've lowered the cortisol, this is going to give you better access to the neural networks that are directly tied to curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking, which are the recipes needed for innovation.
So I'm always hesitant to talk about my great and long-held theories with someone who's an expert, but I've always been fascinated by the interplay between prefrontal and amygdala.
Mm-hmm.
I have understood that when the amygdala realizes in these nanosecond interchanges that the prefrontal is taking executive action to take
Mm-hmm.
charge of the situation, that it will
Mm-hmm.
back off on the cortisol dump because
Yep.
it sees that it doesn't need to panic. Is
Mm-hmm.
that false, or is that anywhere near science there?
Yeah, no. So what the way that you're explaining it is accurate, right? So when we perceive a threat, then our prefrontal cortex is going to act on that. It's going to tell us like how is it that we make the best decision to react to this threat. And that should lead to a feedback loop where it should turn off the amygdala. It should calm it back down once it's received that okay, this has been dealt with, we are good, we are safe, we're good to go. The difficulty or the challenge comes in when that amygdala is constantly being activated, right? So if someone is in an environment, whether it is at home, whether it's in the community, or whether it's in their place of work, on the wards, and they are constantly feeling this anxiety, this fear, this intimidation, that is going to lead to this overactivation of the amygdala that is going to override the signals that is being perceived by the prefrontal cortex. So that negative feedback loop, it's not going to work anymore. And the amygdala is just going to have this constant chaos going on. And you're always going to feel like there is a threat. And we see this in the constant or in the aftermath of really very traumatic situations. You have this really overactivation of the amygdala. Someone's perceiving that there's a constant threat, but you can also see that in really toxic and stressful environments. If there's like this chronic fear at baseline, that is going to have your amygdala just going haywire.
Wow, excellent. So,
Mhm.
what would you say to a very highly accomplished person? And this happened in a conversation a couple of years back with me.
Mhm.
He was talking about a colleague and what a powerful leader she was. And he couldn't say enough about her
Mhm.
in a very complimentary professional way.
Mhm.
And he said, Carl, but that's just not my style. And his upbringing, his culture, his background,
Mhm.
everything had taught him that positioning and winner loser, none of what you're just describing.
Mhm.
He was eminently respected in his field.
Mhm.
What would you say to somebody? Because I hadn't met you at that time, darn it. What would you say to somebody who says, "But Carl, it's just not me. It's not my style," implying that at my age, I can't change. What would you say to
Yeah.
that?
I would lead with curiosity. I really would. I would ask them first and foremost, well, what is your style? I'm curious. I would love to know what their style is. I would love to know whether or not they believe that it has been working and beneficial for them. I would love to know if they have thought the feedback or done any perspective taking on the individuals that they have led and what their perceptions are of his leadership style. And I'd also be curious, I guess, to know what his apprehension would be towards adopting some of these elements that I've spoken to. Because at the end of the day, I think, again, leading with curiosity, that's disarming. If I were to go into that and say, well, if you don't adapt, if you don't change to this specific style, you're just not going to be a good leader. And that means that you aren't dedicated to the craft and like that would lead nowhere. That would truly lead nowhere and just make for a tense exchange. But again, curiosity is inherently disarming. And this will also aid in the process of his own reflection, which is step one of the hard science of the soft skills, right? I want to encourage people to truly try and understand what are the constituents of their mental and psychological and emotional landscape. And if he took a step back and were to say, well, I don't believe in this because my understanding is that the position that maybe, a man should take in this society or a male leader has to look and sound like this. Again, I
Mhm.
would just continue to kind of leverage some of the psychiatric and the therapeutic skills that I've developed over the years and continue to, facilitate that introspection. That would be the role that I would take because ultimately I think a lot of people, they have their guards up, but somewhere in there they can appreciate that there's an understanding as to what's driving their behaviors, what might be driving their reluctance. And I feel like a lot of people can arrive to that understanding without me, like kind of forcing them in that direction.
Excellent. One last question on leadership, and then I want to jump to another lane. You talked again in our pre-call about the micro steps outside the workplace of
Mm,
developing good leadership. You may
yeah,
have alluded to this already in the curiosity,
yeah,
creativity, and critical thinking. Any
yeah.
other for our charge nurse or nurse manager just getting out of his car, thinking, what
Mhm.
can I do different today? What are some micro steps that can get us? Because I love those big three. I'll just
Yeah.
three C cubed. I love it. All three of those could be an episode in themselves.
Right.
Micro steps for us here.
Totally. So I'm going to give you some tangible, actionable tips on what you can do to kind of act out those three C's, those three cubed. So I'll give you one big tip for each one. So if you want to make yourself a little bit more curious, what I would encourage you to do is to embrace childlike whimsy. Kids are just naturally brimming with curiosity. And one of the things that they do is that they will daydream a lot, and we tend to penalize that, like when they get into the school system and when you're at work, you don't want to be seen daydreaming. But when you are daydreaming, you are actually going to be activating the part of your brain that is directly tied to curiosity, which is going to be your default mode network. When you allow your mind to daydream, you're going to activate this part of your mind that is really, really important for curiosity. So if you can, and this is perfect when you're on your way home from work, or if you're taking out a walk after dinner with your dog, whatever it is, allow your mind to wander. Just allow it to wander. Just take in your landscape and just think about things that you find fascinating, and even exposing your mind to novelty is another really brilliant way to really tap into this ability to activate your neural networks of curiosity. So
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by accessing novelty? What does that
yeah,
look?
so an example of what that might look like. An example of what that might look like. So, say for example, I encourage you to maybe listen to a genre of music that you would never even think of coming across, right? That novelty in and of itself, your mind is going to leech onto that. It's going to latch onto that. And it's going to be like, oh my goodness, what is this? You're going to be just activating this network that is like, what is this new fascinating thing? You really want to be able to expose yourself in that way, or something that I was doing actually when I was writing my memoir and I was having really bad writer's block. And I kind of came about this idea of, okay, let me just like shift gears. Let me explore something entirely unrelated to my memoir. And I started getting into cave diving documentaries and videos. And it is something that I would never in a million years do myself. But I was like, okay. And I am now an avid cave diving documentary watcher. And it's just that novelty of like, oh my goodness. And I do think it helped me get over my writer's block. And there is a
Oh,
lot of science to support that. So, yeah.
excellent. Yes, I could not agree with you more that cave diving is something that this person will never be involved in.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
keep
I would
thinking,
never do it.
as a great Mozart fan, that it might be that I really do have to listen to a Taylor Swift concert. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, I mean I'm a huge Swiftie, so this is me understanding my biases. If you can get your hands on a Taylor Swift concert ticket, I encourage you. It's good for science, so
There
I would
we
I would
go.
encourage you to do that for
There we
sure, for
go.
sure.
So,
And then sorry, go
go,
ahead.
go, please. Go ahead.
I was just going to say very quickly, if you want to find ways to be more creative as well, this is just like a quick writing exercise that you can do, but creativity actually loves constraints, right? We realize that some of the best innovation comes when you are limited on resources or limited on time. So if you can force yourself to write a haiku about a random object in your kitchen, this is going to be some of the ways that you can bring yourself into that creative mindset and do something that is really quite odd. So I forced myself to write a haiku about a spoon. And I wish I had it on me right now, but it's like just dare yourself to do something that is unorthodox, untraditional, and don't be afraid of looking silly or looking foolish because oftentimes we edit ourselves or we inhibit ourselves out of a fear of how it is that we are being perceived. When the most highly creative individuals are those who are able to take a risk and think outside the box when other people aren't willing to do that. So that is another really quick, tip as to how you can practice this creativity. And then for critical thinking, I'd say embrace the practice of intellectual humility as well as intellectual dexterity. So intellectual humility is, the best doctors know that they don't know everything. If you ever come across a doctor that believes that they've learned everything that they need to know about medicine, run because that is not going to be the doctor that you want to have in your corner. So embracing this understanding that we don't know everything and we want to continue to have this insatiable curiosity, this insatiable lust for learning, that is going to be step one as to actually how we can become better critically thinking individuals. But also, can you practice intellectual dexterity? So, say, for example, I have this framework. I have challenged myself to explain this framework to my toddler, and then I will challenge myself to explain it to my niece who's in grade 5, and then to explain it to my friends who are also in medicine, and then to graduate level neuroscientists. That practicing that kind of intellectual dexterity will really force me to tap into my creative and critical thinking skills because I need to know that concept inside out and backwards if I'm going to be able to distill it in different facets. So that's another way that I would encourage people if you want to really practice and hone on your critical thinking skills is to practice intellectual dexterity.
I think it was Einstein gets a lot of quotes attributed to him, but this is at least the source I have that if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it yourself.
100%. That is the truest thing. And it's often it's the hardest to distill complicated ideas down to like, something that's very simple and accessible. That is the hardest thing to do. So if you can do that, that means that you have a good grasp on the knowledge. And that means that you probably have, the critical thinking in that area to expand it further.
And one thing that came to my mind when you were talking about writing a haiku about a spoon, and just imagining some of our listeners thinking, oh, yeah, right, I'm really going to do that. We do it all the time when we're training in a gym, and the
Mhm.
trainer says, you need to do this opposite exercise to enhance this weightlifting you're doing. We do that in a
Yeah.
heartbeat. Oh,
Yep.
absolutely. And yet, what you just suggested is exactly that.
Yep.
That haiku is mental weightlifting in a different part
Yep.
of the brain that is
Yep.
not used. And so, what an incredibly good example.
And I think what's also really fascinating, I was reading this book, oh my goodness, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but they said that one of the ways that you can stave off dementia or to build your cognitive and your neural resilience for a mind that is able to, last the decades is that you want to practice new skills for your mind. Like say, for example, trying to use your left hand more often if you're right-handed. That's one of the ways that you can, build up neural protection to stave off dementia is, doing puzzles more often, or, doing Sudoku, or writing haikus, or using your left hand, or picking up a new skill, learning how to play an instrument later on in life. This is all mental gymnastics. You're in the mental gym. And this is really going to be helpful as well to prime your mind for innovation. You're really just building upon those neural networks.
Excellent. So, as we wrap up here, I just want to give you a
Mhm.
moment. If people want to get a hold of you to pursue any of these, your book, your lectures, your keynotes, just to delve deeper into your brilliant world, how do they do that?
So if you would love to get in contact, I'm on most social media platforms at Dr. Chika Oriuwa. So DrChikaOriuwa. And my website is www.drchikaoriuwa.com. And you can also connect with me there. There's a little box you can fill out if you want to send me an email. And yeah, I'm constantly kind of on the go doing different keynotes and presentations. And so if you can catch me on the circuit, that would be amazing as well. And I usually post where I'm headed next on my socials. So would love to connect with you in person if you happen to come to one of my talks.
I can't thank you enough for giving us your time this morning and also on the pre-call to get us better prepared for the recording today. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you so much, Carl. This has been an honor. Oh, and I forgot to mention that my book is available wherever books are sold. So there's the audiobook and then there's a physical book as well, wherever books are sold, unlike the rest.
And I just want to add in here, I have nothing against ebooks. However, when someone gets one of the major houses to pick up a book, that's a huge validation for the author and for its
Yeah.
content. So just a word there.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Doctor.
Thank you so much, Carl. This has been wonderful.